And we are rolling. And today I have my handsome friend, Rob Sarver, here and his partner in a brand new, well, not a brand new, it's a long time project, Alec, and is Alex Gendzier?
Pretty good. Gendzier.
Go ahead and tell us what it is. Want to make sure it's correct.
Alex Gendzier, great to be with you. Great to be with you, Carmen. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how did you two meet? And we're going to start from the very beginning before we introduce what the project is.
Okay. It was probably just going on maybe 6 years ago through another mutual friend. I was connected to Alex. His son wanted to transfer W&L and go to the Naval Academy. And at the time, I think being 17 years removed from the process, I offered to help what limited knowledge I had with the admissions process changing. So I helped Alex's son kind of look at this admission process, and he got in. And from there, I quickly joined the private equity firm where Alex was serving as general counsel. I came as a director, and I think I was employee number 4, but having no experience in traditional investment banking, in especially the debt credit market. So I think as a thank you to me, Alex scheduled weekly calls to where I could get on and ask any question that I wanted about debt credit markets, tax implications. And those phone calls quickly turned to my background and how I transitioned out of the military and how I went through and dealt with and processed many combat deaths from friends and colleagues that I worked with. And that quickly turned into Alex being very forthcoming with some of his own tragedies of life. And I really have to hand it to you. Alex is the one that took a step back and said, Rob, we've lived 2 different lives, in 2 different really universes, but there's these universal themes that have kind of brought us together. And just because you served in the military or combat or not, or in a civilian job, these hard life transitions, we all go through those. So I'll pause, and if I missed anything.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. The thing that has come through that is just amazing about Rob and I working on the book together and our partnership is kind of a frequent reminder that people can come from utterly different places in life. But if they share values, if they share a sense of what matters, if they think that service and contribution are part of how we pay rent to be here, we have a lot in common. What we share in common is a common humanity that's much bigger than any differences of where we come from. So in some ways, our work on the book together is kind of a microcosm of how veterans and civilians, folks that didn't go to the military, can work together.
That was so beautifully said. Thank you for saying it that way. Let's just rewind a little bit. I've had Rob on the show before sharing a few things, but it's been a while. If you could, Rob, just tell people a little bit about your background and where you came from, and how you have become so passionate about this project.
Sure. And I'll start with, I come out of a military family, an Air Force brat. So I knew that for majority of my life. And I say that because that will, I'll play a part in this a little bit later on, but I graduated the Naval Academy 20 years ago, did 9 years active, majority of my time, 7 years in the SEAL teams. I had 7 deployments, 5 of those being combat tours. I chose to step off and get out in 2013. I ended up in Dallas, unfortunately, through 2 funerals, 2 people that I know that died within 2 months. So unexpectedly, I ended up in Dallas and went to go for the veterans program with Goldman Sachs, had an amazing transitional job. But I also realized I was very far behind my peer group, serving in 2 conflicts. So I made a drug deal, I guess, if you want to call it, with my managing director in the legal department, gave up all my vacation days to go do the Wharton Executive MBA program. So I thought working at Goldman wasn't enough. I had to take on the education as well at the same time. After about 2.5 years, I transitioned from that into entrepreneurship Went back to a publicly traded company to do consulting. I've been a chief revenue officer. I've been a chief operations officer for a parent and sub company. And then the last 5 years working on this project with Alex, also standing up a company with him. So that's kind of the span of 20 years quickly for the viewers.
Thank you. How about you, Alex? Can we get a little rundown from your history?
You bet. So I was a Greek philosophy major in college, and after that, because I wanted to be a rebel in my family, I went to Wall Street and spent 7 years there working in banking, working in finance, became a lawyer. I'm a partner at a law firm now. I'm a corporate lawyer. I love my day job. I love my relationships with clients. This project kind of came out of nowhere. It began as, Rob, could you and I put together a 20-page memo, folks getting out? And then we started talking to veterans and found that this was a much bigger cause, a much bigger project, and something that the short version is over the last 5 years, I think we have devoted ourselves to with all of the passion and commitment of the topic of serving people that deserve that. We kind of went out to the folks we were interviewing every month or so to see if what we were doing made sense, whether it was practical. General McChrystal said, don't bother doing this if it's not practical. And he gave us great advice. And will it make a difference in someone's life and in the life of their spouse and their kids? And, in a very heartwarming way, we got reassurance about that, a lot of guidance, a lot of constructive thinking and criticism. We'll tell you one story in a minute about a teammate of Rob's that said, what's the matter with you two on something? And it just kind of took off and has been an enormous effort at contribution over the last 5 years.
So cool. And so how did you guys decide that there was a need for this? Like, what was the catalyst or the linchpin for that?
There was probably consecutive years there's probably at least a dozen veterans that were tracking me down through LinkedIn, asking me about the transition and how they got into finance. And I would kind of give them a list, like, look, this was my playbook, go do this. And I had many come back and say, wow, I just got an internship or a full-time offer at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan, Bank of America. Like, Rob, this is great. And in telling Alex that story, and then again, him recognizing these universal things, like, well, Rob, you're already doing this. You already have some of the playbook. And he's like, but that's just part of it. If you look holistically, there's, the step-by-step transition process that every veteran has to go do, the administrative piece. But then there's the loss of identity. There's the survivor's guilt. There's PTSD, TBI, physical trauma, moral injury. There's all these things they have to go deal with. So we started looking at the space, and we looked at all the literature out there, all the the blogs, the news articles. Everything touches siloed on one piece of it: how to write a resume. There's books and books and books on how to write a resume, from federal to civilian, private equity, whatever it is. There was nothing together that said, okay, this is a one-stop practical guide that can take you everything through soup to nuts on how to transition, how to deal with the emotions, find new purpose, look for all these different things. And the beauty of this is Alex's background in Greek philosophy is tying in frameworks from ancient warriors. So Homer's Odysseus, Heracles, so the circles of concern. So that's where this really, I think, came to light.
That makes it fun.
Yeah.
And so can you show everybody the book that we're talking about? There it is. Warrior to Civilian, the field manual for the hero's journey. And
Yes.
How many different subjects do you have in there? Chapters, I guess.
I believe
16 chapters.
Yeah.
And they're
It's so interesting to me, because I do believe one of the biggest things that I've heard about, and I'm just a layperson, is the PTSD piece. And, have actually worked with some people on it. And it is fascinating to me how powerful certain stories are in people's minds, you know, and certain experiences. And so how do you guys address that in the book? You know, it was one of the things you mentioned.
Yeah, Alex, go ahead. But the first thing I'll say is, you know, we worked with Edward Dr. Tick, and he's written a lot of literature on this. And he was the one that cued us in that really, if you go back all the way to the Bible, Gilgamesh, there's at least 80 references of what PTSD could be. You know, you go back to, was it World War I, shell shock, you know, the 1,000-yard stare, all this. It wasn't until recently, these wars, that we put a diagnosis around it. So in it, dealing with that, working with several medical professionals. Alex, if you want to comment on the PTSD part.
Yeah, I mean, Carmen, you're hitting on a central key thing here. Trauma and PTSD is little understood, and that's a tragedy. And the treatments that are conventionally available for it work with some folks and are really challenging for others. Mm-hmm. We're not casting aspersions on the VA. It's the opposite. We think that they are very well-intentioned, good folks making a difference, but it's an impossible situation. Let me detour about that for a second because it ties into PTSD. This is a historic moment in our country's history about these topics. There have never been this many veterans alive today, 22 million. There's probably 15 million spouses and family members. Because of the end of the 20 years wars we've just concluded in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's 200,000 to 250,000 active duty folks coming out every year. We have historically high rates of those who have served, whether in combat or non-combat positions, with trauma of some kind. And our belief was about this, to tie it into what we've tried to do, that if we can make a difference and we can bring new resources, both in the collection of topics, but within every topic, to bring the best experts and present it in a way that is practical, that is accessible, with a variety of different kinds of sources of healing, then I think that that's what we've tried to do. And the sources of healing are many. If you talk to someone like Dr. Bob Kaufman, who's a 40-year Navy veteran, who is one of the country's experts on this topic, among many others, I think he would say to you that the sources of healing, it's not just taking some pills. It is a variety of things. It is caring for yourself in a healthy way. This sounds kind of cliched, kind of Pollyanna.
No,
but
no,
nothing replaces sleep and a good sleep pattern. When any one of us don't sleep, I'll raise my hand, I get cranky real quickly, but it becomes, okay, you don't have to laugh. It becomes, that was a joke, guys. It becomes dangerous when it goes on for a week. And when you combine that with so-called other comorbidity factors, other factors that frequently arise with PTSD, whatever is the ailment, then it takes on a much more serious tone. And so, again, bring it back to Dr. Kaufman, he has innovated therapies. He's innovated physical therapy, combining it with nature, with physical exercise, with specific diets. And of course, for any of these things, we would never dismiss conventional medical treatments. That has to be the starting point. It's how you build around it and list these things in a practical way, which has been our focus.
Very cool.
Add one thing on the comorbidities, because one of your viewers mentioned this. Yes, survivor's guilt, depression. Think of it as a Venn diagram where you have PTSD in the middle. So clinically, if you hit, I think it's 4 out of the 10, you are classified as PTSD. But a lot of folks do have the comorbidity of survivor's guilt and depression. So they all kind of work in tangent. And in the book, we break that down a little bit more systematically, how you can identify those.
Yeah. So I also think about like just the people I know. Well, let's stay. I'll bring that up later. So when you've got these people have made it through crazy times, and they've made it back here, some of them with all of their body parts, some of them not. It's very, there's a variety of things that happen. And so when you have these people, they're unbelievable under pressure. They have amazing mental toughness. They're unbelievable team workers. I would think that that would transfer super easy. So what's the missing piece?
Alex, maybe this is a good time we talk about the hero's journey.
You start and I'll tag team it with you.
Okay. So Carl, I don't believe anybody who has served in combat is never going to return quite the same, what you've experienced. So, but let's go more broader to just the military in general. It could be a physical injury, a moral injury, or something. There's something to where they left to start this journey of somewhere in the known universe, right? The known world. And they crossed over into this unknown world, joining the service, right? We all came together. We all came in as individuals, and we were through some amalgamated state to be a unified fighting force. And there's military doctrine on this, and there's 3 things that they want to do as they come and codify us into this fighting force. So that's our journey where it starts. But there's trials and failures. There's a death and rebirth. There's a revelation. There's these final challenges. And then when we emerge out of this hero's journey, and excuse me, what I'm referencing is 1940s Joseph Campbell. We come back we're supposed to come back with this gift. We call the boon of the elixir. It could be knowledge. It could be something else. A lot of that might be clouded for the veteran who doesn't know how to come back to the ordinary world and go on to find new purpose, to take the uniform off and refine themselves or find that identity that's lost. So that's a great framework that we talk about through this. But you're right. I think any veteran getting out, or any person in the military getting out, be a veteran, they need a mentor. They need a mentor to help them guide them through this. And Alex, I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah, that's a great summary. There's so much here. When we talk about the hero's journey, we're not talking about theory. We're talking about a way to relook at your life. Carmen, this applies no doubt to you. Rob and I have attempted to bare our souls in this book and talk about our own lives. This is a way to relook at your life and where you are and conceive of it as this hero's journey. I'll detour for a quick second to get into the Joseph Campbell piece a little bit more, because it's kind of central to this. Campbell came up with and kind of innovated a theory of epic tales, great tales. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are foremost, but it's East and West, it's ancient and modern. And it's the idea that someone who's not a hero is kind of plucked from obscurity and leaves home for an adventure. Maybe it's service, maybe it's escaping a bad breakup with a girlfriend or boyfriend, but they leave and they go on this incredible journey. On the journey, they are transformed. There is service, there's sacrifice, there's loss, there's dealing with overcoming amazing challenges. In that journey, they are transformed. They're not the same person in just the way Rob was saying it. Then they come home. They have to reintegrate into civilian life. And we talk about models or frameworks for reintegration, because it's not a no-brainer. You don't just come home. You don't just come home, take your uniform off, and then you're back. And you do yourself a favor by thinking about taking that reintegration process seriously. And then you find yourself back here, back home, and you're living in the mundane life, and you've got this elixir, as Rob says it, which is the magical drink the gods have given you because you've survived and you've triumphed. How do you live with those two things in this world? And everyone has their own answer. But if you look upon the amazing strengths inside of you, and the strengths are internal, they're here, and you put them to use as part of your own healing, as part of serving others, lifting up those around you, lifting up your community, your family, our country, in ways small or big, then you find a way back that combines these parts of your life, and it leads to amazing things. We could go on forever. What we would say to the veteran or the spouse, and we'll touch on the spouses in a moment, is veterans' tales, military spouses' tales are epic tales. Everyone. There is tremendous nobility in these stories and in these journeys. And if you look at your life that way, you can find, when you're having a tough day, a little bit of encouragement. You can find a little bit of purpose that's bigger than yourself. And I think Rob and I have had a lot of rainy days where we've called upon that, and working on this book has brought that out. That's longer than I wanted to go, but the hero's journey is this incredible way of looking at your own life and realizing every veteran is a hero on this journey.
It's really, really well said again. And it's funny because I imagine that elixir, and I know just from my own experience of going through what I call no man's land, you do come out with something, but if you don't share it, I do think that there's a stopping up. I believe we really are here for each other. And, just like, here's Alex, he's this attorney and he's helping Rob, and here Rob got all of this information, and then you guys come together and you collaborate over years for this information that could help. As I'm listening to you, I'm like, this isn't just going to help the military. I mean, I think this could help anyone that was willing to take the time to read it. And then you look at my gift, and my gift is networking and people and bringing people together. And that's my anointing. And here we are. And it's absolutely beautiful. And I really believe that more people should cross generations and different types of people and different genders to be able to bring their gifts, or to bring their elixir, as you guys call it. I think that's fantastic. And I do love the Joseph Campbell. I've read his book. But it also reminds me of motherhood too, because no matter what mother tells their story of having a baby, it's always different. And you would think this very common thing of delivering a child into the world would be like just the same story for everyone. And it is literally different for everyone. And everyone's little story can help so many people. So I would encourage people, and I mean, we're not even halfway through yet, to consider this book before you get married, before you go to college, before, try to see what the obstacles of life are before you actually get to them.
There's Alex, I'm going to steal your quote and your thunder, but it was one of the things in writing this book that, success leaves clues, but also failures. Mm-hmm. And we address both head on. And if we can provide some sort of knowledge for folks that are about to go through a major life transition. And to your point, you don't have to be special operations or a veteran. You could be a first responder. You could be anyone going through a massive life transition, or noticing that you need to, continue on the journey. You need to go through a death and rebirth, and you need to process that information.
There's so much here. There's so much here. I'll never forgive you, Rob, for stealing my thunder. Those
Navy
Carmen,
SEALs, you got to watch.
I knew what he was going to say. I knew exactly what he was going to say. That's why.
Not the first time he's heard it. If Carmen, you've hit on 5 critical things here, and I'll try and be real quick compared to before. This is a book whose underlying theme is that this is a life transition that is major. We liken it to stepping off a cliff into an abyss of the unknown. And what we saw, in just the way Rob said a minute ago, is that there are patterns of successfully managing your life transition, and there's really tough, tragic stories of the opposite. And what we're trying to do here is present tools and a guide for those that want to find the best of the stories. And in some ways, our book is built off of the stories of veterans and spouses. And what's been amazing and just incredibly moving and heartwarming is that not one veteran or spouse that we said, would you contribute to this, turned us down. Everyone wants to make a contribution to the next generation or others. Because, by the way, the transition for most never stops. We heard incredible stories from Vietnam vets. I mean, among the most moving, and we can touch on one of them, but I want to quickly hit on some of the things you said. I think it may make a difference for some in the audience, and that is that nothing replaces talking. From my own life, I can tell you this morning, I didn't know if I could say something that was important in a conversation. I forced myself to do it, had the conversation. It turned into a beautiful, incredibly important conversation. Nothing replaces in the healing and reintegration process speaking with each other, bearing witness to each other, thinking about what was life like in walking in that person's shoes. Healing, reintegration, therefore, happens in community. One thing that we have so much to learn from other societies, including, Native American societies, is that when the warrior class came back from battle, they were welcomed because the society understood what service and commitment and sacrifice they had taken upon themselves, and what is the commitment we owe them. It's not a transaction, it's not an equation, but we have so much to learn from our veterans who come back, and it's a part of this talking process. I've gone on for more than I should have said, but Rob, what would you add to that?
I think you kind of covered everything. Yeah.
So let's can we keep on going, Carmen, with your point from 45 minutes ago?
Please.
One part. So we send our book out all the time to friends and folks that made a contribution and said, is this practical? Don't just tell us nice things because you want to be friendly with us. And one of Rob's teammates said, good work, but what is the matter with you two that you don't have a chapter dedicated to spouses and family members? And he was just completely right. And what we saw was there's a couple of good articles. There's some very meaningful folks making a contribution here, but there's no book. There's no extensive chapter. And what we learned from incredible people, Jen Satterley comes to mind as a leader in this area, is that the transition, the challenges of the spouse and the military family are not just parallel to that of the veteran, but they are as challenging and as significant a life transition as that for the veteran himself or herself. And so this is a part that our country, again, our government's well-intentioned, but our country and our government just can't do enough about. And for everything we're talking about applies equally to the spouse. And it is a topic of incredible importance. You mentioned PTSD. There was a 60 Minutes episode a few months back that showed 3.5 million children in the United States suffer from so-called secondary PTSD they got from their veteran parents or perhaps first responders or others. It is little understood and little diagnosed. That has to change, and we want to help change the consciousness about it in this category of things we want to do. Back to you. Please take it away and stop me.
Beautiful. So I have so many thoughts that were coming up while you're talking. One, I've worked with a lot of people out of they were a professional athlete and they came out of that, and it is a similar death, and it is the death of that character in their life, and it's a process. So I would say this would also be probably a really effective book for anyone out of the sports, professional sports, any kind of really high level, elite level sports. And then the other thing that I was going to say is I do a lot of work with people out of satanic ritual abuse and sexual abuse. And we do a lot of shows about it. And I work with people that do deliverance. And I do think there's a spiritual aspect that it is so unseen. It is invisible. And if you can't see it, it makes it very difficult to acknowledge it and to figure out what it needs. But what's interesting to me, and I would love to hear your feedback on this, Rob, with the women out of SRA or the children out of it, as they're healing, they don't have community because they trigger each other. So one might be listening to another one speak and they start freaking out or being mad or what, they get triggered. Why do you think that's not true in the case of the veterans?
For being triggered with speaking.
Yeah, how come you guys come together? Like you said, everyone wanted to help you with the book. I really believe that out of the sexual abuse world, I can't imagine 100 of them, cooperating on something. So I'm just curious as to what you think that is.
I think from the veteran standpoint, everybody we spoke with, everybody who left the military had a stressor. No one came out unscathed with something. They got out, they saved for 6 months getting out, and all of a sudden a family emergency, accounts were drained. They went through a divorce they didn't see coming. There was a family death. Everyone we spoke with had a stressor. General McChrystal, who walked into Obama's office, and then 30 seconds later, he was very open with us when we spoke with him. I mean, he was a civilian after he had to resign. Having to come home and having, I believe it was his daughter come back and live with him, or having to deal with the sick, like things he never had to deal with, all of a sudden are these stressors again. So we hit commonality with everybody that we spoke with. Everybody had a story of something. And the more we asked, the more they opened up and said, okay, now you guys are really, really hitting on something, and this has not been discussed or talked about, or it has not been put or synthesized into one project for people to go review. Right. And I think that's why we got such great input from the book. Alex, something else as the non-veteran, what did you see?
Everything you said, 100%. I mean, Carmen, one of the sequels that's coming into focus is how to take this book on life transition and apply it to serious professional athletes. And I have one in mind who's just an incredible man who is learned incredible lessons from professional athletics and is using that in such a powerful way. I know from a distance about the kind of abuse you mean. What comes to mind here, and I guess I'll ask for forgiveness about going off into the deep end on something, but I think it's so fundamental to folks that have been abused, as well as the hero's journey of the veteran and spouse, and that is that this is from one angle a very practical venture. You got to fill out forms. You got to find a new place to live. If you're married and have children, there's all of that to figure out that is just mission critical to your family. And there is the hero's journey element of it. Underlying the hero's journey, I think anyone with a so-called spiritual component, and I don't mean to get flaky, I think folks that have been through this will see this and have felt it, is that the choices you make as you go through this, as you feel you're stepping off this cliff of certainty into uncertainty, into the unknown, there's no doubt that, and by the way, some of the toughest special forces guys, battle-hardened folks that we spoke to, they think about it in this way. And they are not immune from it. They have suffered from it. And anyone that's been through life transitions carries that with them, hopefully in a way that has been healed. In this journey, there is, as Rob said a moment ago, there is a rebirth. There's the possibility of rebirth. And folks that have been through tremendous suffering have that creative moment if they're able to take the steps to get there. That's not easy. That is soul searching. That is then having to live with the hero's journey in the following way. Fear and negativity and how that impacts yourself, your own sense of your own demons. That's on one side of your choice. On the other side is some sense of your higher self, your inspiration and hope that you can find. And every day, we all have those choices. Whatever you want to call this, if you want to call this a spiritual journey or just a different way of looking at it, these are elements that we have found people find great strength in and great meaning in. Certainly for the two contexts, Carmen, you began a few moments ago, these things really matter. These things can make a difference.
Yeah. Amen. And then I remember reading a book back in the day by Erwin McManus, and he is a pastor out of South America. And I think the name of the book was The Barbarian, or The Barbarian Way. And one of the very first things he starts with is how the barbarian is shunned unless it's a time of need. And then that's when they become the heroes. And I do think that is a fascinating concept. And I also think that the country can be so fickle in whether they're supporting the troops or not supporting the troops like they did in Vietnam. And so it is you can come home to a double whammy of, okay, this group doesn't really appreciate that you went over there when you really had no choice but to go over there. So I do think there's so many different layers that begin to encapsulate these people. And you're right. If they don't do the work, and it is hard work, they will have a hard time. And it is so wonderful to have the information. It's like a grandma that has a great recipe. Don't die with your recipe. Get it, but share it with people. Don't let it die with grandma. So I'm very thankful that you guys have done what you've done. Can you share with us a story that was moving to you, or something that really touched you during the process? And it doesn't even have to be something that's in the story.
There's a lot. Alex, you want to tell the one from the Vietnam era?
Sure. So from my banking days, one of my mentors, her father was a major in the Marines in Vietnam. And there was a call to go save two guys who were trapped by the Army of North Vietnam. And if no one went to get them, they were gone. And Major Ram called in a chopper, and his guys said, "We're going with you." And he said to one of them, a guy who was probably 18 years old, his name is Daniel Cortez, "You're not going, I'm taking your spot." So they went and they saved them, and Major Ram didn't come back, and he was killed. And he was the father of the platoon. He was the father figure of dozens of guys, and he went and served and sacrificed in place of those people who would have taken his spot. And Daniel Cortez told us this story that happened more than 50 years ago, and told us how he lives with it and how it has encouraged him to find meaning. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't right about our country, including at that time, including of service men and women in Vietnam who suffered things, including racism. And it was worse when they got back home. And yet he found great meaning in this story. It caused him to want to make a difference. He has coached and mentored folks. Rob talked about mentoring. It's irreplaceable on this journey. And he has dedicated his life to the memory of Major Ram to make a difference. And the things he's done are astounding. So that's a short version, and that's just one story.
That's just one, and one actually there's several from contributors from the book. So if you look at Captain Derek Carrera, who's a Naval Academy grad, Marine, he was in a firefight in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, took a round, severed his spinal cord. But this is just a story that, yes, this is tragic. He's now confined to the wheelchair and everything. But as he's laying there in his hospital bed, he came with this idea of, I'm going to come up with a better way or better medical equipment to help veterans who have been paralyzed or with prosthetics. So that set him on a guide to go get his MBA. And now he has started his company. And I believe he's on his second or third venture now. Is still exploring, is still looking to go help veterans. And just another one, just short recap. We mentioned my friend, a SEAL teammate who told us about the chapter on spouses. Dan Canas in 2009, his first operation into country, maneuvering to take the high ground over the target, walked into an IED field. And luckily, I think it was 7 or 9 IEDs that were daisy chained together. The chemical reaction went low order, so the explosives did not go all the way through its chemical reaction, but it was enough to blow off both of his legs at the knees. Another gentleman crawled through the IED field to save Dan's life, put tourniquets. I cannot remember how many surgeries Dan went through, but within less than a year, Dan was on prosthetics and ran a marathon. And he's gone on to win, I believe, 6 medals now in the Paralympic Games. So just 2 stories of incredible individuals who have used what happened to them, not only transition, but to transition with these amazing, say, call handicaps, but being in a wheelchair or loss of limbs, these I'll call them additional hurdles, and have gone on, done amazing things to give back, or to be Dan himself is an amazing mentor in person.
Wow. That is such a touching story. And what's so cool is, like, I remember seeing in Popular Science or something about the future of exoskeletons. And I saw the first one that actually, like, was in social media, and the person was walking really slow, but how amazing. They're like little transformer body. Like, it's just awesome. It's going to just change people's lives.
More than we can tell you. What's happening on the scientific, the medical, the therapy, the healing fronts is incredible. Let me just add one thing. When we talk about these stories, some of them are tough to hear, right? Some of them have a tragic element to them. And one of the questions we asked ourselves early on was, how do we think about our own lives and our own attempts at becoming better versions of ourselves? And what does that mean for folks who have told us stories, and the readers and the audience? And the thing that we want to add and leave folks with is, it's not just really tough stories. It's the folks that crossed the stream, whatever you want to call it, have, as we have discovered, just amazing lightness and joy and things that we look forward to in our lives. And you think about the words of Tecumseh about how to live your life and to find joy and how to live well. That's available to everyone, and that is a core piece of the story and our sense of mission.
It's very cool. And so there's a couple of questions I had that are just random. Is there anything else that you guys want to make sure that you cover before I ask you those questions? Because I want to make sure that you feel like you've had a good chance to share with people what you have here.
I think from my side, this is 5 years of research and work to give back and to still serve the community and the folks getting out. And then again, for anybody who's going through that hard life transition or knows someone, the ancient frameworks, the frameworks of how to process these things, they work. But for what both of you have said, I'll say that we highlight this in the book. There's no substitute to talking or finding the mentor. And the adage of, the SEAL teams or the military in general is everything's team, teammate, self, right? And you can put mission in front of that and you can go further and put God. But we say team, teammate, self. What Alex and I have tried to do is reverse that. That, yes, that works in a team setting, working in a company, I get it. But when you're getting out of the military or you're going through that hard thing, you need to be a little bit selfish and identify and fix the self. And that's where we bring in Heracles' circles of concern. So if you're going to function within your family, You cannot function within your family, and your family cannot contribute to the community unless you fix yourself and do the hard work there. So that's just a couple points that I'll make. And Alex, please, and happy to answer any other questions.
We tell a lot of stories, but we want to invite people to tell us their stories. We would love to engage with folks. There's a spot on our website, which is heroes-journey.net, where we invite people to send us pictures of when they were in, when they were out, and their stories. And part of what we want to do is engage that, because it is helpful to others. These are epic, fascinating, noble tales, and perhaps there's some good from people sharing that. Yeah. It's on our
Always
website.
Good. Yeah, heroes-journey.net, right?
Yes.
I'm going to put it in the live chat again, so people have it. Okay, so a couple of comments or questions, just because it's fascinating to me. Like you were saying, you're going to start with the traditional, VA, but if people are not getting well, there's other supplemental ways to get better. Have either of you looked into the psychedelics and ayahuasca and those type of things? Is that something that you guys have heard anything about? Has there been any success with it? I know that it's kind of a mixed bag with just the regular people, but I'm not sure about veterans. That type of trauma.
No, we definitely wanted to address it. And speaking with Dr. Kaufman, who's also a retired Navy 06 Navy captain, he's kind of a trailblazer on this side, and he helped. There's a lot of veterans. There's programs, vets. I know a lot of that is specifically for special operators. There's other nonprofits out there. We have a whole chapter dedicated to the origins, the science, and how each one of these affects what comorbidity or ailment it's trying to heal. So yes, we do approach that, but we also understand that it's not all of this is approved yet. It's through the FDA. Right. So we recognize that as well. But if people need to turn to that or want to turn to that, we wanted to give the knowledge so at least people are informed.
Sure. Very interesting.
Alex, did you want to?
And then the other one was, you had mentioned earlier, and I found it fascinating, that PTSD has been mentioned, according to this gentleman, up to possibly 80 times in the Bible. Can you give me any examples of that?
Sorry, no, it was in references to literature since the Bible. He's come across 80 different
got it.
Yeah, sorry if I misspoke on that.
No, that's okay. I probably heard you wrong. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's so not to go too deep into the ancient Greek stuff, but there's an ancient Greek historian named Herodotus who wrote a story about two warriors. They came back from the Persian Wars, which were intense conflicts, and one of them was severely wounded, and the veteran next to him had no scratch on him, and it was the person with no scratch that dropped and died because of internal invisible wounds, which can only mean trauma. And so a lot of the doctors from the Vietnam era have found a lot of value in those stories. I think, Rob, you nailed it on the psychedelics. And this is a topic that has to be approached with great care and not just running to a clinic to take drugs. But what we would tell folks is never, ever lose hope. If you are suffering and the course of treatment you've been on, which can take a long time, has not worked, never stop looking, never stop questioning, and never give up hope. There are stories that are just amazing about turnarounds in these situations.
That's so cool. I also remember hearing, and I wish I could remember which Psalms it was, the story of a sergeant, I believe, in the Army, and I think it might even be the 91st Psalm, and it was the 91st Regiment or something like that. And so because of that, he had typed out the entire Psalms for his team. And they were going into two of the most difficult, I wish I could remember more details about it, but two combat situations back to back. They were going to be among the worst. And he asked his men to read that every day. And it literally was like a miracle happened over this man's regiment. None of them were injured, whereas other regiments were completely gone. I mean, amazing story. And I love stuff like this because I do see God moving. And I love the fact that even recently, I had interviewed a gentleman who was a psychologist, and he worked with people who had schizophrenia. And when he started reading Proverbs or things over them, they would start activating and agitating, and the demons, so to speak, would leave them. And I do believe that there's a lot of untapped healing through biblical verses and speaking the word over people. Because even the word hope, like you said, Alex, to have hope, if you look at the origins of the word hope, it's to have confidence in something. And a lot of times we don't use that word that way. We use it like, oh, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I'm going to hope it does, rather than to actually hold. It's like moving the mountain, to hold and have confidence that you will come out and that your story will be triumphant, and how different that will be. And so I would love to hear any last words from either of you.
Alex, did you want to respond to any of that?
Well, Psalm 91 is a powerful one. There are many warriors that consider it their own. It has had a great positive influence on us. No, Carmen, we're so grateful. This has been a phenomenal conversation. We really thank you. We believe in our book and our sense of purpose, and we want to make a difference in folks' lives. So hats off to you for what you're doing, and thank you.
Thank you. Can you hold the book up one more time, Alex, so people can recognize it when they go to Amazon? One of my friends already said she's in a couple.
I'm not doing it so well.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's on Rob's shoulder, so it'll help just to see it. And it's actually comes up very quickly if you just put in Rob Sarver and Warrior to Civilian. It just pops right up on Amazon, because that's what I did. Thank you all for being here. Rob, any last words before we head out?
I mean, I think Alex kind of said it best, so I don't need to echo him. But Carmen, thank you so much, and to everybody watching, thank you for the chance to talk about this book that took us 5 years of our lives, very early mornings and late nights, and putting this together and trying to get the best medical research and doctors we could to come forward and help.
It's incredible. Yeah, we've got all these people in here saying they're buying it right now. So yay, I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being a mentor. I was under the impression for some reason that Alex was a Navy SEAL too. So I've got to correct my I've been starting rumors.
Didn't have that
I don't know
honor,
why. I just assumed you were working with a Navy SEAL, but you got a lawyer instead.
Didn't have the honor.
Covering investment banker at that too. Yes.
I'm in the company of SEALs.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, that's a very safe place to be. Bye, everybody. I'm going to be here Sunday with Amanda Bays and her husband talking about dragons and druid. We'll see you guys all later.